Integral life practice is a growth process, individual or collective or both, that has only become possible in the last decade or two. It depends on some incredibly exciting breakthroughs made by integral theory and other disciplines involving the ways that human beings and organizations grow and evolve and develop. Now, I'm going to throw out a few technical terms here that you don't really need to pay any attention to, not now. But I'm going to just say them for the record, and then when required, I'll clearly and simply explain what we do need to know for this practice. But an overall integral life practice involves showing up in all four quadrants, growing up to higher levels, opening up in various lines, waking up in higher states, and cleaning up, both in its positive aspects or flourishing, and its negative aspects or shadow work. Sounds like a lot, yes? But the point is that these various processes are all now occurring, whether we know about them or not. These aren't just theories that are postulated to exist as some sort of complicated speculations. They are evidence-based realities that are crashing into us every single moment of every hour of every day. They aren't things like deconstruction, which is a theoretical conceptualization that you can believe or not as you wish. They are actually existing territories that are genuine realities in our very own being, fully present and fully active in each and every one of us. Integral life practice takes all of these various territories, some of which have been known for centuries and some of which were only discovered in the last decade or two, and pulls them all together into a self-fulfillment, self-development, and self-growth experiential practice, drawing on all of these enormous potentials in individuals, and thus allowing individuals to become the best, brightest, most developed, most caring, and most realized that they can possibly be. Is this worth it? Does following this practice really do anything that important or that beneficial? Well, this is for you to decide. What's going to happen is simply that some of my friends and I, who are convinced of its worthiness, are going to share with you a series of straightforward exercises and experiential practices and let you try them out for yourself. When we explain them, see if they make sense to you. If so, give them a try. We've got nothing to lose, and judging from the feedback that we've gotten from those who have tried, it will likely be very much worth your while. So let's get started, yes? Various experts in integral life practice will be presenting exercises covering one or more areas from showing up, growing up, opening up, waking up, and cleaning up. Today, I'll be focusing particularly on growing up and waking up, starting with the latter. Waking up is the process found worldwide and often going back 2 millennia or more, a growth process leading to what is variously known as enlightenment, awakening, metamorphosis or transformation, moksha or freedom, the great liberation. Virtually all of the world's great religions have at least 2 aspects, known as exoteric or outside knowledge, and esoteric or inside knowledge. Exoteric or outside knowledge is usually a series of stories, often magical and mythic, purporting to explain the origin of the universe, of human beings, and often in relation to a supernatural being or beings full of miraculous power. And this side of the religion usually involves learning how to assume a correct relationship with this ultimate being. It's a belief system based on various myths, often handed down for centuries. But esoteric or inside knowledge is not a mythic belief system. It is a psychotechnology of consciousness transformation. It's an interior mental science that aims at a direct experience of what is said to be ultimate reality, resulting in a mind-shattering realization of enlightenment or awakening. Here, one doesn't merely think about an ultimate reality, one becomes identified with that reality in a state the Sufis call the supreme identity. You and ultimate reality or spirit itself are radically one. And that realization is said to release an individual from the original sin, separation, or dualism of identifying only with this small, finite, temporal, separate self-sense, and identifying instead with the entire cosmos in all its glory. This is said to be both an ultimate freedom, because being one with the all, there's nothing outside that could enslave you. It's also an ultimate fullness, precisely because you are indeed one with the all, with nothing outside of you that you could possibly want. So this is the ultimate goal of enlightenment, or the supreme identity of ultimate freedom and radical fullness, where you experience a oneness with the entire universe, ending all suffering and misery, and ushering in a world of seemingly endless happiness, fundamental well-being, and wholeness. Sounds a little far out, doesn't it? Well, let's wait and see what you think after we do our experiential practices and you get a direct glimpse of this for yourselves. In the meantime, we can simply note that, as we earlier said, virtually every major great religion has its outside, exoteric, usually mythic components or belief systems, as well as these more interior, esoteric, meditative, or contemplative aspects. These interior esoteric schools form the great meditative and mystical systems found all over the world. In Hinduism, we have Vedanta. In Judaism, Kabbalah and Hasidim. In Islam, Sufism. In Buddhism, core practices leading to nirvana or enlightened consciousness. In Taoism, contemplative Taoism. In Christianity, mystical and Gnostic Christianity, and so on. And as has often been pointed out, all of their esoteric versions maintain essentially the same basic core truth of the supreme identity. In the very deepest part of you, you are one with spirit. You contain the entire universe. Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that, as the Hindu Upanishads put it. In your very true nature, you are one with the entire ground of being. That realization is often called an awakening or waking up, because it releases us from the dream that we are just this small, separate self-sense, this self-contraction, this skin-bound ego, born only to live, enjoy a bit, suffer a lot, and die. Instead, we awaken. We wake up to our real reality, a unified oneness with the entire universe. And it is this process of waking up that is core to the world's great esoteric wisdom traditions. One of the best known versions of a waking up practice is known as mindfulness. This practice is becoming quite popular in the West, although it originated in India close to 3,000 years ago. But it is a profound, simple and straightforward, very effective form of waking up. It also has many very beneficial secondary effects, from increased health to lessened depression to lowered blood pressure to significant pain management, among many others. And it's being promoted in the West mostly for these many secondary benefits, often without much mention of enlightenment or awakening, although its original purpose was indeed and remains a path of waking up. I'm going to walk us through a simple version of this practice in just a moment. But first, let me tell you where this is all going. Waking up points to a profound spiritual growth process in humans. And simply note that, odd as it might sound at first, this overall practice and its results don't have to be put in spiritual terms. They can be described simply as realizing our own highest potentials, or awakening our greatest talents and capacities, or realizing our essential oneness with all of evolution, or increasing our health, happiness, and well-being, or finding our transpersonal and superconscious real self, or simply awaking from a dream world to a higher, truer reality with a greater consciousness, focused in the timeless now moment. But the experience itself is usually so profound and earth-shaking that it is often given spiritual, infinite, eternal, ultimate, and absolute terms, because that's what it feels like. In other words, the same enlightenment experience can be interpreted in many, many different ways, and it is from culture to culture. It can be interpreted from secular to spiritual and everything in between, and that's fine. But if you're put off by religious or spiritual terms, just don't use them, and don't think of this in those terms. You don't want to miss this opportunity just because it's worded in a way that doesn't work for you. So please remember that. The essentially worldwide and universal experience of this realization in the world's great esoteric traditions is just a significant bit of evidence for its reality, but you don't have to get caught up in its spiritual interpretations. Whatever interpretation works for you, it's just fine. The point is simply that we do have access to this higher, deeper, truer reality. And it is a reality that we can actually practice in order to realize. Very similar awakenings are often had with near-death experiences, some kinds of psychedelics, spontaneously in nature, or while listening to music or making love. But those who have these experiences are almost universally convinced of their profound reality. There is little doubt that they have had an experience of near ultimate dimensions. And I think you'll start to see what this means when we get into the actual experiential exercise of this ourselves. But if you're put off by religious or spiritual terms, just ignore them. Wait till you have one of these experiences yourself, and then choose whatever terms work best for you. I'd actually like to hear what terms you come up with. So maybe we'll have a little time to explore that. Now, we said that this experience of supreme reality can be interpreted in many different ways. And that's a very important point, because the crucial role that interpretation plays in all knowledge and experience was only realized fairly recently, during this last century actually. Previously, throughout most of our history, it was common to differentiate between just knowledge and opinion. Opinion was something that may or may not actually be true. It's just based on your hunch or your guess or, well, your opinion. But knowledge was something that was certain. To say something was knowledge and not opinion meant that it was definitely and universally true for all people at all times. It was only in the last century that we started to realize that much of what a culture takes to be knowledge doesn't necessarily, or even usually, have that much certainty. It's often a truth generated only by that culture and for that culture. It's more a cultural opinion, as it were, rather than a universally true knowledge. It isn't a fact, it's just an interpretation of facts. At the same time that was becoming realized, the ways that human beings create their various interpretations was also becoming understood for the first time. The basic point here is that the capacity for interpretation is something that grows. It isn't totally given, all complete and fully functioning right from the start, but rather it grows and develops over the course of time. When human beings are first born, most of their capacities are very undeveloped and their actual knowledge very minimal. Then the human being goes through numerous processes of development, an overall developmental process that takes a person from immature and poorly developed to more mature and more developed, and finally into stages of great maturity and maximum development, hopefully anyway. Thus a person's morals, for example. An infant at birth has little, if any, formed moral principles. It's ruled by instincts and immediate desires. In moral development, these are called pre-conventional stages. As the human continues to grow, it eventually moves into a series of stages that are determined mostly by the culture it's in. It adopts what its clan or tribe or nation considers to be right and wrong, good and evil. These stages are known as conventional or conformist stages. My country, right or wrong, law and order, and so on. If it continues growing, it will move beyond what was taught by its culture and rather start to think for itself, using more universal and worldwide moral principles. These stages are called post-conformist or post-conventional. They are post, or beyond their more narrow culture and are more global in outlook. Now, in each of these stages, when confronted with a moral problem or question, the human being will interpret that problem and its solution according to the moral stage of growth that they are at. Somebody at pre-conventional stages will give very egocentric and self-serving responses. What's right is what I say is right. A child at this stage will simply take toys from other children with no conception of right and wrong. Moving up, somebody at conformist stages will move beyond their own selfish desires and start to identify with the desires of their primary group, but only that group. They will be in favor of their tribe or their group or their nation, and all other groups can just fend for themselves. Again, it's my country, right or wrong. But this primary group can make no mistakes. Its opinions are taken to be absolutely true knowledge, not even to be questioned. And higher yet, somebody at post-conventional stages will give responses that treat all humans fairly, regardless of race, color, sex, or creed. Not just their group, but all possible groups. So from egocentric, self-centered, to ethnocentric, favorite group-centered, to world-centric, all humans-centered. From me to us to all of us. Thus our morals get bigger and bigger and bigger, so to speak. This is clearly an expansion of awareness, an expansion of identity, me to us to all of us. And thus an expanse of moral concern from just me to just my group to all groups, all humans. And thus an increase in capacity for love as well. Clearly, something very important is happening with this maturation process. Now, this whole process is what we call growing up. A human being has a large number of capacities and numerous different intelligences, and virtually all of them are subject to growth and development. All of them are subject to growing up. And at each stage of growing up, you will interpret the world differently. We just saw that in moral development, a person will go from selfish views to group first views to all groups or all humans fairly. And each stage thinks that its truth and values and views are the only true and good ones in existence. All the others are off base, goofy, or just plain wrong. And we'll come back to that point. It's important. Now, starting about a century ago, these various stages of development, stages of growing up, first began to be explored and studied in detail. This overall movement from egocentric, just me, to ethnocentric, just us, to world-centric, all of us. In our overall history, this understanding of growing up was a relatively recent discovery and investigation. After all, we saw that some forms of waking up, for example, were studied and practiced going back 2,000 or even 3,000 years, sometimes more. But the real study of the stages of growing up are only about 100 years old. Why the big difference? 3,000 years or more versus a mere 100 years. the difference between waking up and growing up. A major reason is that when you have a profound meditative or mystical or waking up experience, such as being one with the entire universe, you know that experience immediately and directly. There's just little doubt about it. But this isn't true with these stages of growing up. They are more like the rules of grammar in all languages. Bear with me here for just a minute. Anybody brought up in a particular culture ends up speaking its language fairly correctly. They put subject and verb together correctly. They use adjectives and adverbs correctly. And in general, they follow the rules of grammar of their language quite correctly. But if you ask any of them to write down the rules of grammar, virtually nobody can do so. They are following these large systems of grammar, but none of them know that they are, let alone what they are. These general stages of development in growing up are just like grammar. While you are at a particular developmental stage, you will follow its rules and patterns quite accurately, but you will have no idea you are doing so. Somebody at the conformist moral stage of development will think that their ideas are just the way things should be. They will have no idea that they got those ideas from their culture, or their religion, or their tribe, or their nation. And there's nothing in their ideas that will alert them to that fact. Like grammar, you can't see these stages by introspecting or looking within. They are hidden maps that we use to navigate whatever territory we find ourselves in. And we have no idea we're using them. We think our maps are the actual territory itself. We are looking at the world through them. We are not looking at them. And so we don't really even know they're there. And we definitely confuse map and territory. And everybody knows that's generally not good. This is why we can't discover these basic stages of developmental growing up, these hidden maps, by looking within. We could sit on our meditation mats for 20 years looking within and never see any of the rules of grammar at all, nor any of these hidden developmental maps. Rather, human scientists have to study large groups of people over many years, track and record their various developments, and then figure out exactly what rules and patterns they are following at each stage. And precisely because you can't see these stages by simply looking within, not a single meditative or spiritual system anywhere in the world has any of these stages of growing up. Stages of waking up, yes, and you can see those by looking within. But stages of growing up, no. And some of our models of growing up have 5 stages, 7 stages, 12 stages, or more. And not a single spiritual system anywhere in the world, no matter how old or new, has anything like any of these sequences anywhere. These detailed stages of growing up are indeed a very recent discovery. Another reason no religion anywhere has anything like them. And I think you can start to see the problem here. Now, in all fairness, the many schools of developmental psychology that do study these stages of growing up, mostly Western psychological and sociological schools, although they do have a fairly detailed understanding of the major stages of growing up, virtually none of them have anything like waking up or stages leading to awakening and enlightenment. The reason for this is that, as a fairly permanent acquisition, the state of waking up is usually the result of many years of specific practice, meditation or contemplation or yoga or contemplative prayer or self-actualization practices, and so on. Not many people, certainly in the West, devote a great deal of their time to these practices, if they even know about them. Thus, when Western researchers started studying the various stages of development that were present in any typical population, they found many examples of people at virtually all the various stages of growing up. It's a natural, normal maturation process that will occur to some degree, whether you work at it very much or not. But researchers found very few, if any, people who were permanently at a waking up state. And when they did, they didn't know what to make of it, and so tended to just ignore it. So there are very few, if any, major Western developmental models that have anything like enlightenment, awakening, moksha, or freedom, satori, or non-dual unity, the supreme identity, and so on. So humanity is today, and has been throughout its entire history to this point, in a very strange situation. We have at least these two major paths of development, a path of growing up and a path of waking up. But never have both of those paths been practiced together, ever. This means that humanity has actually been practicing working to be partial, limited, fragmented, and virtually from day one. In short, humanity has actually been working to be broken. And all of history, East or West, is a history of a broken humanity. It's only in the past decade or so that it was realized that we have both of these paths of growth, and that both of them are incredibly important and truly necessary if we want to be fully developed and truly whole human beings. And this very possibility opens us to an entirely new and radically innovative future, the likes of which we have never, but never seen before. And that, in a sentence, is the aim of integral life practice, to combine the very best of the paths of growing up with the best of the paths of waking up. Of course, we include a few other territories as well, such as showing up and cleaning up, as we'll see. But the paths of growing up and waking up are truly central, not only to integral life practice, but to life itself, to being a fully whole and complete human being, no matter what other activity, discipline, or path you're engaged in. And as incredible as it sounds, it's really only in the last decade or so that humanity has had this possibility made available to it. The possibility of including and practicing paths of both growing up and waking up. This itself is truly rather extraordinary, even revolutionary. Now, if becoming a truly whole and complete human being, or simply understanding what that would mean, makes any sense to you, has any appeal to you, then let's explore it in a few more details and then follow it up with some actual practices in both growing up and waking up, so you can experientially realize these paths and directly decide for yourselves. Okay? Let's start with looking into a few more points about this relatively recently discovered path of growing up. As we said, every human being has the potential for numerous capacities, talents, and intelligences that they're born with. Now, it used to be thought that a human being had one major intelligence, usually called cognitive intelligence, and measured with the all-important IQ test. But more recently, it's increasingly been realized that humans have what Harvard psychologist Howard Gardner called multiple intelligences. We have not only cognitive intelligence, but also emotional intelligence, moral intelligence, linguistic intelligence, intrapersonal intelligence, values intelligence, and so on. These are sometimes also called lines of development, or developmental lines, or just lines, as in, quote, all quadrants, all levels, all lines, all states, all types, which is how this version of integral theory is often technically referred to, and that's shortened to AQAL, A-Q-A-L. But there's an equally important discovery that goes with all these intelligences or lines. As different as these multiple lines are, they all grow and develop through essentially the same basic levels of development. That is, different lines, same levels. So, exactly how many levels or stages of overall development in growing up are there? In a certain sense, the response to this is somewhat arbitrary. It's like giving the temperature of, say, a glass of water. We can give the response in the terms of centigrade, or Fahrenheit, or Kelvin, among others. If the water is boiling, centigrade will say it's 100 degrees, and Fahrenheit will say 212 degrees, and Kelvin will say it's close to 700 degrees. Which is right? Clearly, they're all correct. It just depends on how much detail you want. With Fahrenheit having around twice as many degrees or stages between freezing and boiling as centigrade does, and Kelvin 4 or 5 times as much. You just have to say which scale you're using. The same is true of the general stages or levels of development. There are models that give 3 basic stages. Some give 5, some 9 or 12, some more. But if you take all of the available models and put them all together, like on a table, what you find most often are essentially the same basic 6 to 8 or so major levels of development. I did a book called Integral Psychology, and in it are charts from over 100 different developmental models. And in the majority of those, the same basic 6 to 8 major levels keep showing up again and again and again. Once more, this doesn't mean the others are wrong. It's more a matter of how much detail you want. And the most commonly used are these basic 6 to 8 or so major levels of development. We'll be going through each of these in just a moment so you can clearly see what each of them looks like and which one of these level stages you are mostly at. A discovery that might surprise you. Right now, the major point is simply that these levels of development are indeed very important because in many, many ways, the very views, ideas, and experiences that you have of reality at any moment are in large measure molded, even determined, by the level of development you are at in any of your multiple intelligences. Your level of development is so important, it will even help determine how you experience something like waking up. And yet most of us don't even know we have these levels of development, let alone what ours happens to be. They really are hidden maps, just like grammar. And some people get rather angry when something like this is even mentioned. They, understandably, don't want to be told that what they took as their own original thoughts are in many ways largely determined by the hidden maps gotten largely from their culture that govern their interpretations of reality. But variations of these levels of growing up have been tested on individuals everywhere, from Amazonian rainforest tribes to Australian Aborigines to Mexican workers to Russian citizens to Illinois housewives. And no major exceptions have been found to their existence. When we focus on them, we'll go through all 7 or 8 major levels of development and clearly point out how you can understand each one of them in your own awareness right now, thus purchasing some degree of freedom from the hold they have on you at this time. So that's a crucial reason for us to become aware of these stages or levels in our overall path of growing up, to speed up our disidentification with them, or letting go of them, or being free of them. Now, for this disidentification, we're going to use, in a central way, mindfulness. Thus, for the first time, bringing together aspects of both growing up and waking up into an integrated, unified practice. As an introductory overview to this, and just for the moment, we're going to temporarily set aside growing up and focus instead on waking up. And then we'll return and fully and profoundly join both of them in a truly integral or unified fashion, part of the major breakthrough of the last decade or so, fully driving toward being a whole, complete, and truly fulfilled human being.